We're good. We are good. Awesome. Okay. We are going to go through. Well, I went ahead and finished what we were going. How do I talk about this? Yeah, this. Let me put this here. Put this here. All right. So it's the next day. So we are a couple days. So we are a couple days removed from that last time we're looking at the stock. I went ahead and made some more changes and organized things a little bit better according to those principles I was telling you about. Making sure that the initial paragraph or line underneath the heading was doing a lot of the explaining. The bullet points were enough in the terms of like technical expertise to demonstrate that expertise, but enough in like human language so that a layman could understand them. Someone who's not inside of an IDE all day could understand them and then see the importance of these action items. Okay. So I went ahead and got this to a place that I'm pretty happy with. It is basically covering over all the major components that I outlined before. And we are at 6 pages. I don't want this to be so much that a person will actually not read it, or they will see it and consider it to be slop in some sort of way. There's actually a thing about these kind of elements. There's a thing about, I guess, there's a thing about presenting your findings. There's a component about presenting your findings that if you do it in a way that's simple, can actually display more confidence versus if you do it in display where you're over talking, can show that you're actually full of BS, right? And this shows up in marketing as much as it does in sales. If you're selling something and you can't stop blabbermouthing and you just talk and talk and talk and talk, you're never doing enough listening to the prospect to hear what they actually need. And so by its own nature, you're not able to really sell properly. When it comes to things like this, someone has to read this information or have them, or they're having you walk them through it. And very similarly, if you're spending 5, 8, 12 minutes going through all your presentation, someone's going to check out. It's the same thing with any sort of deck, any sort of speech, or anything like that. You have to kind of interject moments for people to actually kind of wake up again, for them to snap out of the haze or the trance of just being distracted by other things in life, right? And again, it's just human nature. So as much as you want to put like all these different things and components and like text and reasoning and all that stuff inside this, it's better to make it simple and easily explained. And then if someone wants to go a layer deeper, let them know that you're more than willing to answer those questions. But what you're giving them is you're giving them as a level of like enough clarity, enough resolution to see what they need to know. Everything else you can handle underneath. Okay. Using that metaphor of a car, once again, you're going to tell someone that a engine is causing problems and restrictions in the car going fast and being efficient. You're not necessarily going to tell them that piston 1 and also this spark plug and also this hose and also this filter and also this leak and this other thing is what's causing the engine to give you problems. Some people are car guys and they're going to want it, right? Very similar here. Some people are going to know enough about technical stuff that they're going to want to understand that so that they understand either how to build it themselves or just to have a conversation with you, not necessarily to challenge your expertise, but maybe even in some ways to just understand that you understand what you're talking about, right? So that being said, I'm pretty happy with where this is. If anything, we can style this up a little bit more to be a little easier on the eyes to read by adding things like underlines or anything like that. But for right now, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I think it covers most of it. And just to give you kind of an overview of what actually got figured out, the user experience, there's a lot of stuff that is just explained. There is a hero section that's missing, meaning there's not like an explainer section in the app to explain how to go through the app itself, right? The app is assuming too much, assuming that A, the person, the user is going to find it valuable, and B, the person is going to know how to extract that value by using it a certain way. Going down from there, onboarding is very similar. Person doesn't know how to sign up and how to consistently use this thing. And that is super key because you want to make sure that the person's first time of using this or the person's first time of getting value from this is as smooth and easy and simple as possible, because you have to kind of reach out and shake your hand digitally. And if you have a weak, limp wrist, and someone's going to judge you off of that handshake, right? So you want to have a nice, firm handshake that feels strong, that guides them through a process, and that makes sure that they get the value cleanly and quickly. Excuse me. Ah, whew. From there, and kind of very closely related, you have navigation, which is typically the things along the top ribbon or the side panel where someone goes to the different parts of your app. And if this is not clear, or if it leads them to places that they get too distracted on, it can be very, it can also lead to a situation where they're not getting that first piece of value as quickly as they could. And as soon as someone feels overwhelmed, they're going to usually as soon as someone feels overwhelmed, they're going to have a large possibility of just exiting the entire thing. So you want to try to remove that sort of you want to try to remove the probability that they're going to get lost or overwhelmed with clean navigation. Similarly, with design, you want to make sure that everything is laid out in a way that is not too visually scattered, has enough white space, and there's enough clarity on the hierarchy, meaning big important things are big visually. Small important unimportant things are small visually. And if you have buttons, they're different color and small little things like this. But design actually plays a huge role in leading someone's attention. If you know anything about photography or cinematography, you know that the layout and composition of elements within a frame really guide your eyes. A lot of times you don't even really know it, but the best directors, the best photographers are always setting things up, right? And if you use those principles in your design, you can kind of guide the user's perception, right? There's an interesting study. There's a heat map. I'll actually pull it up right now. There's a lot of studies that people so there's a way that you can actually track this, but a very common pattern that you'll see is something like this, where there is a hero section where you'll have information on the left, like a headline and a subheadline, and then some kind of icon or figure. So this one is exactly that. You have the headline, the subheadline, and then the face of the figure here. And usually that's how people work. They go from the top left and then scan to the right, like if you're reading a book. And this one paints it very clearly, right? So you want to have a lot of key information in the top left. Unless you're doing something like displaying a picture of a human, that can sometimes change everything. But typically, if it's going to be what most people are doing, which is something like a piece of information and then a photo, top left is where you want to have your most important tagline, headline, sales point, or whatever. Again, this is eye tracking across different platforms and different situations. It's a very natural human thing. So, with all those in mind, if you set those things up properly, you can give yourself the best opportunity for people moving to the next step, which is core functionality. If people get overwhelmed and lost and don't know how to use the thing, it's not going to be as easy for them to use the thing and feel the actual functionality that you're going for. So, now that we have it figured out, we move into the core functionality. Core functionality in this case is creating an SOP. And in this case, in our case, the core functionality of creating an SOP was a little too cumbersome again. A little bit of the same idea of removing the overwhelm, of removing the confusion. I wanted to make sure that we had less checkboxes, less clicks, and less information, like text information, in order to get one of these produced. Once we got that done, then we had a section where there's uploading and processing. And this can be something that also scares a person away because if you're asking them to upload a file and it's not clean and simple, very clearly labeled what you're expecting from them, and then also what works and doesn't work. And if that upload was successful, that's another point of potential frustration. So you want to make that nice and smooth. And these are the notes that I was talking about here. Lastly, we have the output and saving, which is basically once that core workflow, once that core functionality is done and delivered, we want to make sure that it's very clear that the person had a successful action and it's very clear that the thing that they created is saved and there for them. They didn't just waste all that time. If you go and you create a profile and you go through the process of adding in your name, adding in your phone number, adding in your address, adding in even credit card information, and you're not clear that it was successful, it's going to feel like a huge, it's going to feel like a huge waste of time and also a huge cause for distrust. So you want to make sure that that part, that successful action, is very clear to the end user. Moving on from there, we have stuff that's a little bit less front facing and more in the back end. Code base cleanliness is just making sure that we're looking through the files and keeping things as clean as possible. Something very common for all these tools like Bolt, Replit, Lovable is to have just an over is to have way too many files that are documentation files. So if you don't know what a README is, basically that should be your one pager for what the entire app does. An explainer so that if someone were to download your GitHub or your code base, they can go to that README and basically understand the entire process of your app, any sort of build notes, any small technical requirements, and things like that. And ideally, it is something very clean, simplified, and easy to read at 200 lines max. Sometimes you will need some other things like extra docs, but those shouldn't be a whole lot more. Those should really only be reserved for things that are kind of out of the ordinary or you want to make a special note of, but you don't want to have way too much. And in this case, we had quite a bit of those document files. Again, this is kind of standard for the lovables and bolts and replets of the world. It's not exactly their fault, but it can be from sloppy prompting. And at the end, you end up with a lot more files than you need, and it makes the code base way more difficult. Because if you want to go back in and understand where you're coming from, like what the intention was, the README may no longer be accurate. Because instead of revising this, you added an extra document and then an extra document, and now you need 3 documents to understand one, the thought process all the way through the different changes, and then just to kind of even understand all of it, right? And so if you're ever bringing in new engineers or you yourself are trying to refer back to what you were thinking of, it makes it a lot more difficult. And here, that's just a bit of an explanation of why that should be avoided, the big files. Also, more importantly, we have big files within the build itself. So it's not just exactly the documentation, but it's also making sure that we clean up the lines of code within the actual build. Some of these components are 10,000 lines long. You want to avoid anything that big. Honestly, you want to probably get to at most 1,000, 2,000 lines, and that's still pushing it. Ideally, you get lower than that. I know some engineers are going to have their opinions on that, but as far as best practices and best principles, you want to go to a less is more kind of thing and make sure that just every different thing has its own folder, right? If you have different processes within the code, you want to give them their own TSX file or HTML file, whatever makes sense in that case, but you're going to give them their own component, right? If you want to have one process of uploading an image and one process of editing an image, you want to have separate components for that underneath a bigger folder that is anything image related, right? It's very basic categorization, but again, it can be difficult when you're kind of coding with a prompt that doesn't know exactly the intention behind all that. Going a little bit deeper, database architecture is the thing that holds the data that supports everything. So if you create a profile, if you run an SOP, if you have information that you input, that data in the database, in our case, Supabase, is going to be what holds all of it. And the architecture of that is very important to make retrieval easy and also to make sure that we're not bloating down anything and making the whole entire thing slower. If we have too much, we make the thing slower. And if you slow down your web page, you can actually also reduce user conversion and usage. Beyond that as well, we have authorization and security, just making sure that the exact permissions of making sure that the permissions that you want for individual users is very tight and clean. Meaning if you want someone to be a normal user versus an admin, obviously they're going to see and do different things on the app, and you want to make sure that that's encoded into the authorization portion. That's also, in a way, security, but then you also want to have outside security, meaning people on the outside of browsers or people visiting the page, not just users internally, but people visiting the page from outside can't hack into it without a password and a username or things like that. And then the last one that I have here is scalability. Basically trying to highlight anything that might break as soon as they start adding more and more users or as soon as they start moving into bigger projects, meaning things like file limits, timeout limits, rate limits, offline functionality, basically expanding the use of what the app currently is and making sure that it's built enough to withstand those changes. Okay. So that being said, that covers a lot of what I believe the end user in this case. That covers a lot of what I believe the client would want to see to make sure that they have a full understanding of what we went through and then to feel confident in the recommendations that we make. But again, this is a very long document, 6 pages with a lot of depth, and it's not the longest that I've seen. I'm doing a good job as far as keeping it under 10 pages because There's a lot of documents that you'll get from AI or just other people that be 10, 20, 30 pages. Again, maybe to try to showcase their expertise in a certain way, but I always think a less is more approach has always worked better. And so what I want to do is maybe even make it less and more by doing a deck. And so this deck is supposed to do these same ideas. It's supposed to display the same ideas, but in a much more readable way. So this here, again, very simple cover letter. You have the audit structure here going over the same things that we just went over. And then we have critical gaps, which is just highlighting some of the things already that we're seeing to make sure that we can start to paint the picture of the gaps of where they are and where they want to be. This critical gaps is kind of like an overview and then gives them kind of an information of just what I mean by that, what tech deck is, the overall idea of bloat and inefficiency in the front and back end, and so on and so forth. Then we move into further widening the gap by introducing more critical gaps and more information on these critical gaps and giving a bit of a one-liner to let people know what is happening here. Let them know why we have this idea that we need to move into the next steps. And then once we have this, we explain the next steps, which is the game plan. A 2-month rebuild with bi-weekly check-in calls, 1 to 2 written updates per week. That'll give you a new front end, a new back end, and the ability for their team to make minor adjustments in bulk going forward. If we need to have a list here, I put a list here so they can feel like we have a prioritized fixed list. So we'll go down and do this. So once again, we have this one, and then the section on the right, which is basically painting the picture of all the things that we need to fix. And on the left-hand side here, we're showing the solution. And then lastly, we have a potential look so that the front end, they can see that we have the ability to create something that's clean and simple, and then potential look too if they wanted to go for something a little bit different. But presenting these are not necessarily going to be the final look. We still need to kind of agree on mockups and screens and functionality and things like that. But this is A, just showcasing that we can design something good, and B, showcasing that the same way that we're thinking about the cleanliness of the code, we're thinking about the cleanliness of the user experience. And that, I believe, is something that's underrated. Again, you have the ability to do these kind of mockups, so why not add them in? It really, really, really does make a difference, in my opinion, because you're just showcasing that you have enough foresight, you have enough taste to be able to make something that is pleasant to look at. You don't want to just make something that solves the problem technically if no one's going to use it. And so this is an example of doing that and showing that and making sure that it's actually quite obvious that that's what we're doing. Okay. Okay. So now that we're here, I feel pretty comfortable as far as delivering this doc and this deck, but we still have that layer of interpretation, right? We don't know how exactly the person that gets this doc and deck is going to read it. I've met the gentleman. He's a nice guy. He's pretty straightforward. He's the CEO. And so he thinks very like, just give me the clear answers and give me the clear information and I'll make a decision. A lot of CEOs think that sort of way. So we can assume that he's going to go through the stuff that's the least mentally taxing, meaning the deck, and then go into the depth down here below. But what I'm thinking I'm going to have to do to make sure that I give myself the best chance of not being misinterpreted is create like a side-by-side video like I'm doing with you here, like a loom, where I'm basically looking at this, sharing my screen, and going through the thought process, right? I want to make sure that he has basically my entire perspective on this and to paint the picture on why this is such an issue without him having to go and deep dive and read all these individual bullets to make them kind of sell him slowly but surely. Obviously, that'd be nice if I can know for sure that he is going to look at the deck, he is going to look at the doc, but you just don't know for sure. So I want to make it clean and simple. So if I want to go above and beyond, I would make a loom to support all this where I'm sharing the screen and talking through my thoughts just as much as I'm talking through to you now, with a little bit more of like a salesman pitch focus to it. Obviously, the last thing is talk about price, but everything else is really just figured out. Let me see real quick. I wonder if I should go through the next one. Um, Let me see. Let me see. There's another portion of this build that I recently gained some more responsibility of that I want to redo. I want to see if I want to go over them now. Um, okay, I think here's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm going to cut this off here. We're going to move into the next one. Hmm. Okay, okay, okay. So I'm pretty happy with this one as is. What I need to do now is to kind of recreate all this for a different build with the same client. They have two builds that they want us to do something like this on, but we want to make sure that we treat them as separate builds in terms of the documentation. Just for clarity on their end, we'll sell it all as a package deal, but for clarity, we want to make sure that it's something quite simple. So what I want to do is open up a new one over here, and this one's going to be called Facility Insight. That's the name. Oops. Facility Insight. And I don't mind using these sort of like, what's it called? Predetermined sort of looks. I actually like this one. Does a lot of stuff there. Can I add another one? Okay. Let's see. This one's good. Delete this one. Sounds good. This one here. Hmm. Maybe this one. Okay. Mm-mm-mm. Hmm. Okay. Okie dokie. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull some information from another essentially audit that I did where I looked at a project that currently exists within Softer. Okay. If you don't know Softer, Softer is another one of these builders, but it was approaching it from a more drag and drop perspective. So initially, Softer was only drag and drop within the Softer system. And so you would drag and drop different things like tables, inline graphs, and text, headlines, and it would add on the users, the authentication layer with data in the backend as well. But it has recently become its own version of a lovable and Replit and started to add in prompt coding or prompt AI coding, right? The reason that I don't like it for this particular thing is because it reaches a certain ceiling when on the front end you only have a certain amount of components, and if you have to vibe code it, it is difficult to interact with the like with it is difficult to connect a vibe coding component with a native softer component. And that is their fundamental issue right now. They could be working on it to do it a little bit better, but I already know the skill of just going straight to GitHub, straight to a custom code base. And if we want to get the things that we actually want, it's just might as well do the exact thing from the bottom up. Okay. So in this case, I went through a softer build, and that build currently has all these different features. and I believe that's 34 lines. So 34 features for one app is a lot of features for one app, right? Ideally, you want to have less than 10. Ideally, you want to have less than 5 main features because every one of these features is going to have some depth and kind of like sub features in between it. And you also want to make sure that you have enough to improve this stuff and maintain this stuff. And if the features are any good, they're typically going to have some kind of variables. They're going to have some kind of calculation. They're going to have some integration or connection or anything like that. And any one of those areas can be an area for this thing to break down. The more surface area you have of features, the more likely it is that you're going to have something that's going to come up in the future that's going to end up causing you problems, right? So we're going to do a kind of mini presentation here based on this stuff. And then I'm going to have to go through a little bit later and make sure that I look through it all and see that it makes sense. But for right now, what I really need to do is paint the picture that this is way too much stuff. So in this case, what I'm going to do is minimize this, bigify this, if that's a word. And then we're going to go and we're going to see how this is laid out. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Yeah. So, as I suspected, 3 to 5 core features is the ideal place. Even this one here, it says every successful app has one single most important job. And if you have a list of 34, that really needs to be reduced. Okay. So, I might go ahead and kind of quote something like this within the presentation to just show that I'm not kind of, thinking about this or anything like that. You really, really, really need to have 1 or 2, maybe 3 core features. Let's see if we can get something from Microsoft. This is design.google, which has a lot of good information on how to create good user experiences. There's a lot of stuff like this released by some of the big boys like Microsoft and Google that you can actually go and see, and it'll help you. It'll help you by letting you know what's useful, what's working, what's not working, what they've studied. And these people have fortunately put this stuff together for people like myself, indie developers like myself, to be able to make things that are to the quality of high level builds. And if you just go and spend some time here, every so often and look at it, you'll be able to pick up on things that make everything that you design just a little bit better. What I'm trying to look for is some backing with that idea of the ability to. What I'm trying to look for is just some backing with the idea that you want to have less features. I know that it's kind of intuitive, but just having some sort of backing would make it just a little bit more kind of certain, if you will. There you go. That's the one I want. This is another one that I've saved. Material Design 3 is Google's open source design system for building beautiful, usable products. So if I go to foundations, I wonder if it'll tell me anything about, material, layout, building for all. Let me see if I go to content design. I'm just gonna go to perplexity. Okay, I'm just gonna put it in there and we'll talk about defining it later. Right now, we're gonna name this feature bloat, and we're going to lower this a bit. I'm gonna italicize it. I don't know if this is how I want to say it, but this is some form or another kind of what I want to say. This app currently has just way too many. Okay, so if I delete this, no. Is it all grouped together? I don't know. See if I go up. The fuck? How do I like ungroup it? There we go. Is that just on the fucking thing? It's a little annoying, but all right. Kind of want to reduce the size of everything. Let's just go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. How can I get that little thing? Oops. Stop. Stop. Is this thing connected? Oh, it's like a line in there or what? Oh, there it is. Yep. Weird design choice. Okay. Okay. Delete this. Delete this. How do I fit 34 features in here? Let's see. So we're going to turn this into transparent. Oh man. Okay, never mind. We got to do this. We need to go there. Oops. Text need to be white. There we go. Go there. Boom, 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 boom. Mm. Ooh, what else we got? Oops. Oh, not the highlight. Sorry. The wrong button. Okie dokie. All right. I'm just gonna. Mm-mm-mm. Mm, what? What? Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm. Okay. So for this one, this was a brand new build or a different build entirely. Well, let me see if everything's where I need it to be. Okay, so this deck was something previously that was 13 pages long and had a lot of technical components to it and just didn't really speak the language of what I would consider to be CEO language. Okay. And I wanted to redo it to make sure that we are speaking in the language of the CEO, which means clear and simple, action oriented, problem and solution focused, and moving towards the end goal. All right. So I took a deck that was 17 pages and made it into these six. Now, you could argue that we should find a sweet spot in the middle. We have 12 because you need to build a little bit more. But for the most part, I think I have the main components. The first one is just outlining the entire process, what we're doing. We're focusing on analyzing what we currently have, pruning to get some stuff that actually matters, and then perfecting that stuff that remains. The feature bloat in this case is the biggest thing. And this is very common for a lot of builds, maybe even potentially your builds. 3 to 5 core features is ideal for any sort of app or product. Anything more than that, and you're running into the issue of just user confusion. Basically, they're just too confused to use the dang thing, or more importantly, or as importantly, the inability to maintain all the features. If you have 6 features, but 80% of people use one, but 10% of people use one other one, that one could cause a lot of headache when it's not even the core feature. So it's better to start smaller and to keep it small. Whereas something like this has bloated all the way to 34 features, is what I counted. We want to just go down to the initial and important 3. This is also causing downstream issues, meaning because we have all these products and features, because we have all these product features, we have 64 automations, broken data links, generic naming and labeling, user role inconsistency, stale data, duplicated data across wastewater and drinking water, unsupported UI elements, unintentional access granted to roles. So because there's so much surface area of things to actually manage and take a look at, all these things are slipping through the cracks. And it makes it horrible to go in there as an engineer and try to fix stuff because you know there's like 20 problems and you're just trying to focus on one. And then it's like the Medusa head or the head that you cut off one head of the dragon and then a couple other heads show up. So it makes it very difficult for an engineer to go in there and maintain it. So what we want to do is recommend 3 ideal features And then +2 if necessary, just to kind of save ourselves, because if they deem some stuff really, really necessary for whatever reason, we can have that conversation. We can have that conversation and then together decide on what actually deserves to be built out. We also want to make sure that we sell the idea of, instead of revising from what they currently have, meaning revising within software, we're focusing on rebuilding within a custom platform, which allows us to have everything that we really need. We have the ability to back up all the information that they currently have and maintain a lot of what they currently have, while also being able to move into something a lot better for them. We can move into something a lot better for them and their users, because with a custom interface, we can move things a lot more specifically than these drag and drop builders. And we can also insert a lot more functionality in the back end. With something like software, we're really kind of contained to what they have within their building blocks. But with custom software, we obviously have a lot more to play with. And then last one here is just a little bit more detail on what the rebuild actually looks like, what it would go through, and then how we would go about doing that for them. So again, I took something that was 17 pages just to show you really quick here. It is going to be something that has all these different things, the kind of main ideas, but it's split across a couple different areas. And it's just got some stuff that's a little less clean than I would like it to be. I made it the simple 6-slide basics to make sure we're going through all of it that we need without overwhelming the person that's reading this, and making sure that we have a clear plan, a problem painted, and a solution painted, and the next steps. So this stuff here, these things are very important for your sales calls to make sure you can actually sell the why behind what you're building, right? And again, we're focusing on the context of building these apps for businesses. If you want to go and have users, meaning like very low ticket, sub $100 a month subscriptions for users, you need to treat them with the same kind of respect. You want to understand from them what's working and what's not working. And you have to do it across time, you have to do it across use cases, and you have to have a lot of these users to even get that feedback. We're in a situation where we have one business that's using this. Yes, they have other people using this, but we're talking to one main source that has all these different problems and situations that we can design for. And this is why I recommend always going towards this route. And if you're new in the space, this is why I recommend going towards this route, selling apps and custom builds to businesses, because you get a lot more insight without the problem of trying to go and market users, convince them to sign up, get feedback, and then move that into the iteration cycle. Those users are a lot less sticky because there's not a lot of buy-in already. There's all these different offers, and likely they're going to see that yours doesn't do it, not even offer any feedback, and then just move on. And if you're good at marketing, you can do that, and there is a way to do that. But I always recommend going this path, building for businesses, so you can really tighten up the screws and make sure every other component of it is good, and you're not having a marketing issue, and when you should be focusing on the building itself. That's how you build the skill, and then you can focus on the skill of marketing itself. That being said, if you want to learn more about this entire process, check out the school in the link below, and we'll detail everything that you need to know on how to audit, how to prune, and how to perfect, just like the slide says here.